A woman was bent over in the yard, struggling to chop firewood, when a postman suddenly walked over from nearby and asked for directions. After she pointed him the way, she did not even receive a thank you, yet she did not get angry. Instead, she brought over a pot of cool tea and poured the man a cup to quench his thirst. Seeing him drink it all in one go and still look like he wanted more, she thoughtfully filled his cup again. The woman asked him, "You walk such long distances every day, so what do you think about?" The man did not say much. He only said thank you, then left. What he did not know was that some bonds had already been quietly written by fate. Cheval was an ordinary postman, walking day after day through quiet, beautiful, old-fashioned villages. His life had no waves and no miracles. Just like the little paths worn into the mountains, they twisted and turned, but offered no unexpected scenery. Everyone had a surprisingly consistent impression of him. He was withdrawn and bad at talking to people. Cheval did indeed suffer from serious social anxiety. Even with his wife and son, he rarely spoke. He did not even know how to be a father. One day, his wife sadly fell seriously ill and passed away. Many relatives and friends came to the funeral, but Cheval hid in a corner and did not dare come out for a long time. With his father's guidance, he finally walked out, every nerve in his body tense, but he did not greet anyone. He only stood stiffly beside his son, Cyril. After the funeral, everyone gathered to discuss how Cheval and his son would live from now on. His parents knew Cheval could not communicate with people, and had no idea how to care for a child, so they decided to send Cyril to his uncle's home far away. Cheval was completely lost and wanted to refuse, but he could not get a single word out. Cyril did not want to leave home either, but he did not even have time to pick up his mother's fallen red scarf, much less change the adult's decision. And just like that, in a short span of time, this family of three was reduced to Cheval alone. Although no grief could be seen on his face, he still picked up his late wife's red scarf. He seemed to feel that placing it on the shelf was not visible enough, so he put it on the highest part of the cabinet. In the eyes of outsiders, Cheval was cold-blooded, a man without feelings. His wife had died, his son had been sent away, and yet he had not shed a single tear. But the postmaster knew his loneliness, and understood the grief he could not put into words. That day, Cheval went out to deliver letters as usual. While resting, he read a newspaper article about Angkor Wat. The magnificent buildings and exquisite carvings in the photographs instantly lit up Cheval's eyes and deeply touched his heart. On his delivery route, he would pay special attention to the flowers, plants, trees, birds, and animals he saw. To others, leaves all looked the same, but to him, the one at the very top of the branch was the most beautiful. He often got scratches all over his body just to observe these things, yet he never felt the pain. Every time Cheval went to the mountaintop to deliver mail, he passed the home of Philomene, who had been widowed for many years, and every time, Philomene would pour him 2 cups of water. After enough visits, the two gradually became familiar with each other. Cheval also finally answered the question she had asked when they first met. He said, "I like walking. I once imagined building a house in the forest." This was the first time Cheval had ever spoken to anyone about his dream. Unexpectedly, Philomene did not laugh at his wild imagination. Instead, she found the idea truly beautiful. Just as Cheval wanted to show her the photo of the Mayan temple, Philomene unexpectedly noticed the scratches on his neck. She took out a handkerchief and carefully wiped Cheval's wound for him, and the love surrounding the two of them seeped quietly into both their hearts. Not long after, church bells rang across the mountain village. Philomene moved into Cheval's home as his wife. Although the room had no extra decoration and none of the joy a newlywed home should have, Philomene did not mind at all. She even smiled and said she had a piece of pale red fabric that would be perfect for curtains. Through the dust-covered window, she was instantly drawn in by the beautiful scenery outside. Seeing that Philomene loved the view outside the window just as much as he did, a faint change finally appeared on Cheval's face. Her arrival also poured a steady stream of warmth into this cold and empty home. Philomene would take down the red scarf from the top of the cabinet and use it, without the slightest hesitation in her heart. She would also guide Cheval into speaking while he made bread, playfully pinching off a small piece of raw dough and putting it into her mouth. She was like sunlight, shining little by little into Cheval's lonely heart. After marriage, Cheval still walked the country roads every day, delivering letters. Only now, when he came home, someone answered him. The abandoned backyard was also planted with all kinds of vegetables. One day, Cheval went to the postmaster in a daze and whispered that Philomene was actually pregnant. This should have been happy news, but no matter what, he could not feel happy, because he had no idea how to get along with a child. And so, Cheval spent the next few months in nervous anxiety. That day, he had just finished delivering letters and returned home when he heard the sound of a baby crying. He stood outside the door for a long time, not daring to go in, but he still had no choice but to accept this reality. Philomene had given birth to a beautiful and adorable daughter, but Cheval had not even properly looked at the child's face. He did not want his life to change in any way, and even his 3 meals a day remained the same hard bread. Fortunately, Philomene insisted on taking care of him, and for the sake of his health, she forced him to eat carrots and other vegetables every day. Although Cheval remained as cold as ever toward his daughter, watching this tiny life grow day by day still touched the softest part of his heart. He was always secretly looking at his daughter, and Philomene caught every one of these little movements. To help Cheval learn how to be alone with his daughter, she discussed it with a close friend and came up with a brilliant plan. She deliberately placed the endlessly crying baby into her husband's arms, gave him a meaningful look, then turned and left. She saw every bit of her husband's helplessness, but still hardened her heart and did not look back. From the moment the child was born, Cheval had never once held her, or even leaned in for a closer look. To help him learn how to spend time with the child, Philomene used the excuse of going to a friend's house to get clothes and hurried away. Cheval held his daughter carefully, completely at a loss. He had no idea how to stop her crying. He tried holding his daughter's little hand and gently patting her the way his wife did, but it still did not help. That night, the child kept crying in her crib, while Philomene committed fully to pretending she was asleep. With no other choice, Cheval could only stand nearby and gently soothe her. Over time, Philomene's method really began to work. Cheval actually started playing with his daughter on his own. Because of these interactions with his daughter again and again, Cheval's monotonous life seemed to gain color, and even his steps became unusually light. That day, while delivering letters, he was suddenly tripped by a stone and rolled straight down the hillside. He struggled back up and picked up the letters scattered on the ground, but just then, he noticed the very stone that had tripped him. Cheval dug little by little, and after 3 hours, finally unearthed the entire stone. It was a huge stone covered in patterns, shaped almost like a racier mushroom. He limped all the way home with the stone on his back. Philomene did not understand why he had done this, but Cheval only stared silently at the stone. A wild idea that would confuse his wife even more gradually took shape in his heart. The next day, when Philomene came to the backyard, she suddenly discovered that all the vegetables she had carefully planted had been pulled up by the roots. On the ground was a pile of stones in all different shapes. Sure enough, this was Cheval's work. On his days off, he kept moving between the forest paths and the backyard, hauling back stones of every size and shape. Once he had collected enough stones, he began mixing cement and lime together. Destroying the vegetable garden and piling up ordinary-looking stones was such a crazy act that no one could understand it. Even Philomene had no idea what he was trying to do. Only when she heard the promise he made to his daughter did Philomene realize that he actually wanted to build a palace out of stones. This idea was, without question, pure fantasy. Cheval had never had any experience building houses. More importantly, he still had to earn money to support the family, and had no time for something so pointless. Yet facing his wife's uncontrollable anger, Cheval said he would not give up his job as a postman, and would build it at night during his free time. Although he had never been a mason, from the look of it, building a house was not so different from making bread. Building a house simply meant mixing cement and lime together. He ignored his wife's objections and insisted on building a perfect palace. Philomene understood his personality. Once he set his mind on something, nothing in the world could pull him back. And so, rain or shine, Cheval pushed his wheelbarrow out to collect stones, then came back and stacked them up little by little. After enduring one blazing summer and one freezing winter, the rough shape of a palace gate finally appeared in the backyard vegetable plot. Her husband's persistence eventually moved Philomene after all. When heavy snow fell, she would drape a thick cotton coat over Cheval's shoulders. She would also pour him a bowl of hot tea. Just like when they first met, his wife's silent support quickened Cheval's steps toward his dream. As a postman, delivering letters was his job. At the same time, collecting stones became his daily mission. One person's project was difficult and long, but it could also be wildly imaginative and wonderfully impossible. Building the palace required not only stones of every shape, but also decorations made of seashells and oyster shells. Layer upon layer, it became vivid, creative, and full of life. Flowers bloomed and withered, and in the blink of an eye, 8 years passed. Cheval still walked the country paths delivering mail, his work both light and heavy. As his dream kept expanding, his daughter Alice was also growing up in a hurry. She would hand her father stones when he needed them, and play hide-and-seek with him inside the palace that was already beginning to take shape. His daughter's innocent smiling face became the strength that kept Cheval going. He not only blended the flowers, birds, trees, and plants he saw every day into the palace, but also added animals he had only ever seen in photographs. He had no foundation in carving at all, and shaped everything by hand, yet he still gave them a living energy. Alice inherited Philomene's playful nature. She not only ran around while her father worked, but would also run over from time to time to act cute and cling to him. Although Cheval was not good at communicating with children and pushed his daughter aside again and again, deep down, his fatherly love had already overflowed. That day, his son Cyril, whom he had not seen in 8 years, suddenly appeared and said he was going to Paris for work. Cheval's face still showed no emotion, but the moment his son turned to leave, his hurried steps revealed the unspeakable reluctance in his heart. One day, Alice was mocked by boys in the village, who said her father was a madman building an asylum. Alice angrily picked up a small stone and threw it back at them, but the words still shook her inside. After she returned home, Cheval worked as usual while telling his daughter a story, just as he did every year, but he only ever told that one story, and Alice already knew it by heart. After a brief conflict between father and daughter, Alice lay in her father's arms again, just like when she was little. She told her father that even if everyone laughed at him, she was still happy, because her father had built a palace for her. Seeing that his daughter could hardly wait to see the finished result, Cheval began working deep into the night by lamplight. Unexpectedly, he suddenly fell from the scaffolding. According to the doctor's diagnosis, he had missed injuring his spine by only 2 centimeters, which would have left his whole body paralyzed. Fortunately, Cheval had only suffered several minor fractures and was not in serious danger. After a short period of rest, he threw himself back into building the palace. That day, a newspaper reporter came looking for him after hearing the stories. He had long heard rumors about Cheval and was preparing to write an interview about him. Alice met him at the village entrance and brought him to the backyard. The moment the reporter saw the palace, he was deeply captivated by this unbelievable structure and could not stop marveling at it. Soon, the news about Cheval building a stone palace all by himself was published. He was also awarded a Medal of Honor by the post office, thanking him for his contribution to the postal service. The village mayor even held a celebration banquet for him. The villagers no longer called him a madman. Now they were proud of him. But just then, a devastating blow suddenly came for Cheval. Someone handed Cheval a basket of freshly picked vegetables, because they knew his family's vegetable garden had been flattened to build a one-of-a-kind stone palace. But when Cheval came back with the vegetables, he found his wife looking deeply grave. Their daughter, who had recently caught a cold and fever, had suddenly gotten worse, lying in bed without a trace of her old energy. Philomene did not dare show even a hint of sadness in front of her daughter, but when she came into the yard, she could no longer hold it in, because the doctor had already declared that their daughter would not live through the night. Cheval sat by his daughter's bed, wanting to tell the story he had told hundreds of times one more time from beginning to end. His trembling voice was filled with fear, but in the end, even that story could not keep his daughter with him. When a tragic scream rang through the night from inside the house, a mother's tears could no longer be stopped. Bursting out like a spring, Cheval had never known how to express grief, and understood even less how to pour his heart out to others. His daughter's death seemed to drain every bit of his soul. He stumbled to the little river he passed every day on his delivery route, fell to his knees, and wailed. As if that still was not enough to release his pain, he even buried his entire head in the river again and again, washing the grief from his body over and over. He buried his daughter inside the palace he had built with his own hands, hoping she could forever be its little princess. However, he was told that doing so violated local regulations. Cheval angrily went to argue with the mayor, but the result was far from satisfying. The dead had to be buried in the designated cemetery according to the rules. On the day of the funeral, Cyril also came with his family of 4 to see Alice off one last time. 5 years had passed since father and son last parted. During that time, Cyril had married and had a daughter. To honor his late sister, he had also named his little daughter Alice. Yet no amount of comfort could stop the spread of grief. Philomene could at least still cry and confide in her friend, but Cheval said nothing at all, and could only carve bloody marks across the back of his hand to vent. He often ran alone into the wilderness, following the winding river downstream. Even the palace he had spent more than 10 years building came to a halt because of it. Philomene could see that he had lost hope in life, but had she not lost it too? Yet she knew in her heart that their daughter would surely want to see the palace completed, because it was not only Cheval's dream, but also their daughter's unfinished wish. Holding back the tears that were about to spill out, Philomene got dressed and decided to find someone to support the collapsed areas. Cheval still said nothing, but that night he packed all of his daughter's clothes into a trunk. The moment he forced the trunk shut, his whole body trembled. The next day, he carried the wooden trunk on his back and climbed step by step to the highest point of the palace. Since he could not bury his daughter here, he would use her clothes instead, letting her stand forever in a high place, overlooking the land that belonged to her. When Philomene heard Cheval say he would finish the palace, the worry hanging in her heart finally settled, because she knew her husband had pulled himself together again. For the first time, Cheval took the initiative to stand behind his wife, wanting to say something, but in the end he only rested his head on her shoulder. Philomene turned and held him in her arms. One embrace was enough to let the couple support each other and keep going. From then on, Cheval kept working day and night, and the shape of the palace grew clearer and clearer. Those stones, so ordinary that people usually ignored them, had been carved and shaped by his skillful hands, adding endless color to this magnificent palace. While Cheval continued chasing his dream, his son Cyril also made a decision. He moved his whole family back from the big city to this small mountain village. Father and son had one thing in common: neither of them was good at expressing himself. But Philomene could see that Cyril had done this so he could take better care of his father. Cheval still walked the mountain paths every day delivering letters, then used his breaks to continue building the unfinished palace. Everything seemed the same as ever, only now, he could tell his stories only to himself, letting the breeze carry them to Alice far away. The little helper from the past had already become an angel and flown away. And now, Cyril not only took on the role of helper, but also read the newspaper to his father while he worked. The invisible wall between father and son was crumbling little by little. Cheval, who was never good at expressing himself, even deliberately dripped mud onto his wife's head. When he was caught, he revealed a mischievous grin, like a successful prankster. That day, one of Cyril's photographer friends came after hearing about the palace, wanting to take a few photos and make postcards. He estimated that these postcards could bring in a high return of 100 francs. Cheval gave no response after hearing this, and his son looked confused, thinking he was going to refuse. But then Cheval asked his wife whether there were still onions at home. Philomene said that meant he was happy. Only the wife who had lived with him for so many years could understand Cheval's joys and sorrows. She knew he was actually excited, because his palace was about to face the whole world. The photographer asked him to stand in front of his great masterpiece, so the building could be given even more living energy, but Cheval stubbornly refused to step into the frame. In the end, his son volunteered to be the model. Philomene could see that he really wanted a photo with his palace, so she quietly encouraged him beside his ear. Finally, Cheval gathered his courage and walked to his son's side. Every corner of the palace now held the image of this self-taught architect, but Cheval still felt that something was missing. He called out, "Alice." That call of Alice was both a call to his late daughter and a greeting to his 12-year-old granddaughter now. Alice loved this palace from the bottom of her heart. She dreamed that one day, she could hold her wedding here with the person she loved. The family left behind a precious group photo in front of the palace, but the good days did not last long. Cyril unexpectedly fell seriously ill and sadly passed away. After Cheval heard the terrible news, he shut himself facing the wall for an entire day and night. All of his grief spilled into that cold corner. After 30 years of turning grains of sand into a mountain, the palace from Cheval's dreams was finally completed in the backyard vegetable plot. A fairy tale settled into the dust, and a miracle appeared within the ordinary. Every stone revealed its own unique beauty. Every line of writing on the palace was carefully carved by Cheval, carrying his longing for his loved ones and hiding his understanding of life. However, Philomene did not live to see the palace reach its perfect completion. At her sickbed, she reluctantly said her final goodbye to Cheval. She murmured that every day with him had been happy. Illness cruelly took Philomene away from Cheval's side. The scene of their first meeting, and the moments they shared with their daughter, were all deeply carved into Cheval's heart. Those precious memories, just like this stone palace, would forever stand in the place where they belonged, unshakable. In the 3 years after his wife's death, Cheval still pushed his wheelbarrow with unsteady steps, collecting stones. As he was doing the final repair work on the outer wall, his granddaughter Alice returned to her hometown with her fiancé to fulfill her wish of holding her wedding there. On the day before the wedding, Cheval finally completed this palace that carried love and dreams. He dressed neatly and attended Alice's wedding, and Alice also brought over the box her father had treasured most while he was alive. Inside, there were no valuable jewels or gold and silver, only the newspaper clipping from Cheval's first interview. Although father and son had rarely kept in touch back then, Cyril had always been quietly paying attention to his father. Cheval held the box tightly in his arms, and no one knew what he was thinking in that moment. If time could flow backward, perhaps he would not have sent his 8-year-old son away, but would have kept him by his side. This dreamlike, romantic wedding continued until nightfall. Watching his granddaughter walk toward him step by step, Cheval seemed to see the figure of his daughter Alice. That little angel who had once run around him, constantly calling him Papa, had finally returned before his eyes. In front of the palace he had built with his own hands, Cheval finally waited for the daughter he loved down to his bones. Only this time, he chose to follow her, flying together toward a farther and happier place.